This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
Amidst rising religious tensions and violence, it is crucial to prioritize the security of high-risk learning environments. Embark with us on a mission to strengthen the foundations of education. Hear from former FBI hostage rescue team member Greg Shaffer, School Safety Director Mark Lomax, and Kathy Hargis from Lipscomb University in our conversation, Securing Private and Religious Schools. I'm going to introduce our amazing group of panelists today and guests. Our first is Kathy Hargis with Lipscomb University. Kathy, would you mind just giving us a quick background on yourself and your tie into this topic today?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be on this distinguished panel of all of you. And I am, again, at Lipscomb University. We also have Lipscomb Academy, which is a K through 12. We're located in Nashville, Tennessee, a thriving and growing city. It's a blessing and a curse. We'll get into that today. But you know, our K through 12 really has about 1,400 students. So it's I've been here going on 19 years now, and my role is really in risk and compliance efforts. My risk role, my risk hat, really has to do with integrating our emergency and crisis planning for the university and for the academy, which we are on kind of one campus together. So there's no way to separate those two. So look forward to sharing some of our experiences and talking about that a little bit further.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, very interested in hearing some of your experiences. Also joining us is Greg Shaffer. He's returning to conversations. Welcome, Greg. Glad you could join us.
Thank you for having me again. All right, good to be here. My name is Greg Shaffer. I'm an 11-year veteran of the United States Coast Guard and a 20-year veteran of the FBI, where I worked violent crime and counterterrorism matters. I was also a member of the FBI's hostage rescue team, conducting tactical operations all over the globe to include Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, those kind of places. Retired from the FBI in 2015 and started Shaffer Security Group, a security consulting firm out of Dallas, Texas. And in 2021, I partnered with Chris Bronek and helped him build the current active shooter prevention project, of which I'm a principal. I'm also the author of Stay Safe, Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. No, thank you, Greg. We're happy that you could join us as well. And Mark Lomax, welcome. Mark is from the George School. Mark, just a quick background.
Yes, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. And again, it's a great honor to be part of this esteemed panel. My name is Mark Lomax. I'm currently the director of campus safety at George School. George School is a Quaker high school. It's boarding. About half the population is about 550 students. Half are boarders, half are commuters. A quarter of the boarders are international students from all over the world. Been around since 1893. We have about 240 acres, about 70 buildings. It's a large campus. It's about an hour north of Philadelphia. Myself, I spent 27 years at the Pennsylvania State Police. I then left there, went and worked for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the IACP. I was their training manager. Then I went to Liberia, West Africa, where I worked for the United Nations over in Liberia for a year. And then I came back and I was the executive director of the National Tactical Officer Association for about 5.5 years. And recently I've been part of the Department of Justice Critical Incident Review team of the Uvalde shooting. So again, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome, Mark. Yeah, no, and we're once again pleased that you could join us. And to our participants, I mean, this is such an amazing panel here with such an amazing experience. So if you have questions, I want to remind you, hit the Q&A button on your screen. There's also the chat option, but if you enter the Q&A, that will get your question into the queue. So let's take a look at the results here from our poll. So this is interesting, and this is a good thing. So it looks like most of our participants, or at least almost half the participants, have a safety director. And that's a very important role. I mean, that's really what we always call the linchpin in any educational organization, is to have somebody who owns the safety role preferably on a full-time basis. So that is great to see. And as far as the roles, I mean, it's right across the board here. And we have some directors of school safety, consultants, industry folks, K-12 administrators, some higher ed. So Okay, it's right across the board. So we have a nice mix of participants here. So let me stop that. Mark, just we'll let get your opinion. Like I'm a little bit surprised that almost half the folks have a dedicated security director. Are you surprised at that, or has that become kind of more of a trend in the world of education?
Yeah, it depends on the school district. For independent, private and religious schools, they usually have like a director position. In public schools, that position may be something else. So it depends on the school itself, and whether it's private, public, religious. But from my perspective, most of my peer schools that I speak with, most of those are being run by directors of campus safety or campus security. So it's not surprising.
No, that is, and I know, Pennsylvania, there are certain states that require, at least for public schools, to have a safety coordinator, but a coordinator in itself is not necessarily a director. It could be an English teacher who handles the safety related topics. So, Kathy, let me ask you. So, how would you assess the current state of security in religious and private schools today?
Well, I don't think there's a one size that fits all. I would say that because just, here in Mark's school, the school I'm at, we're all a little bit different, different sizes, I'm sure everything. But what I'm seeing though is like, I think for, religious schools, there's really kind of a expectation with all that's going on to move to kind of higher standards. I'll probably talk a little bit at some point in time here in Nashville. Unfortunately, we had a very public school shooting this year with a Covenant school, and how that's kind of changed everything for everyone. From new laws that have been rolled out to funding to different things. So I think, that I'm seeing a lot of change. Are we all at the same place? No. But I think the expectations and best practices around what's expected is definitely elevating, and that bar is getting higher.
So, I mean, Kathy, I mean, so let's just expand on that. So, what has changed since the Covenant school shooting as expectations?
Sure. I will say, I talked a little bit about our school. We have two campuses. We have an upper school for our 5th through 12th and a lower school. So the Covenant school was probably less than a mile from our lower school. So a really close proximity. We are in a residential area called Green Hills, is where our both campuses are located. Covenant school is in Green Hills as well. After that, obviously, I mean, just such a terrible tragedy. Around that, we had a lot of legislation from the governor that came out, for the state of Tennessee. There's a lot of things that they have enacted, and as far as what they're expecting now, there's some funding. I think there's $230 million of funding that has been kind of rolled out for all of these new measures that they're really asking schools to do. And this is for really public and private as well. I mean, there's certain mandates that we have to share all of our plans, everything with all of the, responders with the state. We all have to do a better job in communicating. There's, alert systems that we are now mandated to have in place. And obviously being at the higher ed, we've been used to that for a while. And I think some of your probably K through 12s have as well, but maybe not everyone. And there's a whole list of things. I don't want to take up all your time with that. There's a whole list of mandates that really came out as a result of this. For one, I'm glad that they took some action at this. You don't want it to be after the fact. You always wish it was before the fact of something happening. But hopefully it will help all of us to have a better plan, better systems in place for all of the kids, public and private.
No, absolutely. And Kathy, if afterwards, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those links in the community, just so as a resource, appreciate
Sure.
that. And so, Greg, I mean, I know you work with schools, you work with houses of worship. I mean, how does a religious school environment differ from how is it different from a public school, or are they the same?
Well, they're definitely not the same. Most of the training and education when it comes to active shooters in the public school system come from the local police department. Hey, I'm a big fan of police officers, love them all, but they kind of get pigeonholed and focus a lot on their response. And I think we need to change the paradigm here a little bit and start focusing on prevention. And what private Christian schools can do is, they can get somebody to sponsor an outside speaker, an outside trainer to come in and provide some information that the police can't provide. Because the police, when they do give their training, again, not only do they focus on response, but they are hamstrung a little bit by political correctness, what they can and cannot say according to the city council, the mayor's office, that sort of thing. So my recommendation for the security director for private Christian schools is don't let your ego get in the way. Bring in some outside experts, okay, and broaden your horizon, broaden your picture, and let's think about prevention. Now, prevention includes things like artificial intelligence in cameras. We need to increase the camera coverage of every school in America, private and public. And what those cameras we need to install, weapon detection systems, flight detection systems. The AI can detect anything. Somebody can be stealing catalytic converters in a parking lot of the school. The AI would capture that. But more importantly, it would capture somebody pulling the AR-15 out of the trunk of the car and getting that mass notification out to everybody to go into lockdown before that shooter even gets into the school. That's the prevention side. So response is critical. What you do when you're caught up in a critical incident like that is important to know. But let's get in front of the incident. Let's get left the bang and think out more about prevention.
Exactly. Absolutely. I think that is our objective with ZeroNow as a community is prevention, and we always talk about the importance of preventing an event from happening in the first place. There are behavioral factors that can predict potential issue leakage, as you all know about. But if that fails, how do we detect a threat early, like Greg is talking about with weapons detection technology, at least securing the perimeter of your building, at the least, using cameras that exist that are never sleeping. They're always awake 24/7. I shared this with a group before. I was just in Scotland, and you have all these castles with watchtowers at all the corners of the building. This is not a new concept of having somebody or something. Now we could utilize AI to keep an eye out 24/7 for threats outside the perimeter. Greg, you had some thoughts there.
Yeah, I have one more point when it comes to prevention. One of the issues at hand here is nationwide, the ratio of students to school counselors is about 475 to 1. Okay. The National Association of School Counselors recommend that number to be 250 to 1. Okay. Our U.S. prison system has about a 250 to 1 prisoner to counselor ratio. So we do a better job at counseling our prisoners than we do our children. If we increase that or decrease that ratio and increase the number of counselors, again, that's the prevention model. That's identifying those people who may have a propensity for violence or are going through a difficult time in life. And then we can do a threat assessment on them. Do they have access to weapons? Interview their friends, their parents, their colleagues, their coworkers, their teachers, their coaches, and determine whether or not they are a threat to themselves or to others. But we have to increase the number of counselors in our schools and to get them to communicate with local law enforcement, local healthcare professionals, that sort of thing. Kathy alluded to it. Communication is key.
And Mark, I know that for public schools, I know especially in like Virginia, there are requirements for behavioral threat assessments and assessment teams. Does that exist in the private school sector? For example, at George School, is there some sort of behavioral assessment team or process that you undergo? And is that even required by law?
Yeah, and I was going to chime in about what Greg was saying about threat assessment and talk about prevention. That is, one of the major keys into preventing, especially school violence when it's coming from internally, from students themselves. And so here at George School, we do have a threat assessment team that's informal now, but we want to formalize it. So my challenge to those that are on this webinar is, do you have a threat assessment team? How often do you meet? Is it formal? Do you have forms to fill out whenever you're dealing with a student? Do you understand do you understand FERPA and how it relates to threat assessment processes? So that again is a major component when it comes to most of these school shootings when they involve students, like 90+% of the time they had already shown signs to do something violent. It's always after the fact when they interview other students, teachers, counselors, whatever, like, oh yeah, he was or she was, acting weird, or they were absent a lot or whatever. So these are the things that, as what Greg was saying, can prevent these major incidents. So that is definitely a huge part of the prevention model is threat assessment and threat assessment teams.
Kathy.
Yeah, Mark, I had a question for you because we have one here that is made up of a cross-cultural, I would say, group of people, which is good. How do people report things in? Because I find that, the easier, the more that you can make it for people to report things, the better your results. Do you have a online format, or how do you all handle that?
So we don't currently. We're in the process of formalizing our threat assessment team, but that is part of the process. The venue of how to report things, whether it's from the students, whether it's on an app, whether it's faculty members reading things, when students handing in their written assignments or whatever, or overhearing things. So it needs to be a holistic approach. It shouldn't just be one venue that you have this one way to bring this to the attention of the school. So it needs to be multifaceted. There's plenty of information out there on threat assessment teams and how to stand them up, and the different modalities of how to bring that information to the team. So,
Great.
There was one thing I wanted to bring up was when you're talking about the shooting down in Nashville, that it was very unique. And every shooting, they were very sad and tragic, but there's a learning component to everything that happens. And one of the things that was very unique down there, let me back it up. One of the things that we all try to do and we all advocate for is locking the doors, making sure no strangers come in. We have electronic access doors, you have card readers and stuff like that. And that school down there did it perfectly. There's 2 times, well, there's 3 times that any secure doorway system can be breached. One when people come in and one when people go out. But the third one was very unique down there, is that individual shot out the glass and went in. And so when you're looking at securing buildings, and we have this card access and you have these very secure doors, this individual down there did the third way, is that they breached it by shooting out glass. And, we have to figure out, are the windows and the glass around our doors, bulletproof, protected, or whatever, and so that just made things a little bit different as a result of the way that individual got into the school. And so again, your weakest point is the bad person's strongest point to get in. And so when you mentioned about Tennessee, it was like, oh yeah, that was very interesting how the individual got in.
You're absolutely right on that. And I just want to say, they had done so many things right. They had their training, they'd gone through all of the stuff that we would normally think, would just lessen the risk. That's that one thing that, that breach was very costly. But it's the one thing maybe you hadn't thought about, or maybe a lot of people would not have taken that extra step. I can say after that happened, probably every school in Tennessee, especially around Nashville, was trying to get their, the coverings. It really became a shortage. That's a whole different story. But I think that, helped everyone to see some of the vulnerabilities and taking an additional step there.
Yeah, I agree. And let's not forget the Sandy Hook incident. Also, the shooter went through the door after he shot the glass. But there are solutions to that. At the Active Shooter Prevention Project, we partner with a company called Clear Armor, and they put a film on the windows and film on the doors. Very affordable, and it comes in like 7 different, types of film where it's not breakable. It makes the glass impenetrable to, a baseball bat or a ram or even bullets as well. 3M makes the same thing. So, that is something that, there are solutions to it. They can be affordable if you do it right. We're not talking about ballistic glass. That's very expensive. We are talking about film on the windows. And I think we should look into that and make that, again, part of the prevention module.
Now, so Kathy, since we're on the topic, we've been talking a lot about security, physical security measures and everything. And I'd love to hear, Kathy and Mark, what measures you have, because Mark mentioned a holistic approach, and we completely advocate for a holistic approach, a multi-layered approach. So if you wouldn't mind each just describing what measures you have in place from a physical security infrastructure, and then I want to jump into like some of the cultural things. So while we're on the topic of physical security, I'd love to hear how you are set up.
Mark, I'll let you go. Okay, you go.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm kind of new to this. I've been here 2 years. And so one of the things that we try to do over the last 2 years is, like kind of what Greg alluded to about technology, is to we have a very small staff, but we're 24/7. So one of the things that's very unique about George School is that we have residents. So a lot of our staff or faculty, they actually live here. So they have houses here or apartments here. So they live on campus. It's a big campus. So that's why we need to be here 24/7. One of the things that we have done recently over the past year is to increase the number of cameras. We went from we tripled the number of cameras here over the past two years. We also started locking down all the academic doors. The dormitories were already locked down, need card access to get in. And so now all the academic buildings, and we have maybe 10 to 15 different academic buildings that are used throughout the day. Those are 24-hour lockdown. You need an access card to get in there. And so being that you need that, we had to go through this whole process of making sure that all students and all faculty and staff had an access card and ID card, because before only the boarders needed access cards because the doors were locked, and during the day all the buildings were open. So we had to go through the whole process of getting everybody access card, ID cards, locking down the buildings. And it was literally a learning experience for the whole campus, the whole community. Again, we try to utilize those measurements, the cameras, the door mechanism, the access cards, locking down even interior doors. So those are some of the things that, and we have an open campus. There's no gates, there's no guard checks. It's pretty much open. People ride their bikes through here, people walk their dogs through here. And again, when we talk about culture, and once we get to that, I'll talk about more of that in detail, but those are kind of things that we've done here as far as campus safety.
Mark, do you have an armed response on campus? I mean, you have students that live there. Do you have armed guards that are trained accordingly?
So we do not. No firearms are allowed on campus. But one thing that I did do when I first got here was really reach out to our local, state, and federal agencies. And then, again, I'm jumping ahead talking about culture, but then bringing our local police department in here, bringing the state police, bringing the FBI on campus, giving them a free meal, and then it's showing around the whole campus, driving around, showing all the different buildings. And, especially ASACs and SACs, they come and go. And so I want to refresh them. Police chiefs, they tend to stand a little bit longer, but even like the state police, they command, local command, they come and go. So I try to make sure that, the ones that are in leadership now down here have understanding of the campus. And we have a great, phenomenal relationship with our local police department that covers our campus, and they're allowed to come on campus. They're given keys, and we have a great relationship to that. So again, we're not armed, but the response time, if we need it, will be very quick.
What is the response time?
It could be seconds, depends if the person's out front, or it could be maybe 5 or 6 minutes, depends if they're at the farther end of the township. So,
Kathy, talk about Lipscomb, how what your physical security infrastructure looks like.
Sure. We're probably a little bit unusual in that we have both the university as well as the academy, and part of them are on the same campus, which, I think there's no way, as I say, to separate that in your planning efforts. And I would say one of the things that I would encourage, and this is coming from probably my risk hat that I wear, is, have you really conducted a thorough, risk assessment? What do you currently have? Where are you going? What are the gaps? And, that needs to be, in my opinion, a continuous process, because things change. You really need to be doing that. I don't know, maybe an annual basis, I would say. Maybe some people would say that's too much. I would say it's probably on an annual basis. So I think, we have conducted that. I think after Covenant, it made everybody have a step back and really think about, what we thought we had, and what do we really have, and where are those gaps that we need to fill in. On a good note of having the university here is that we do have security. They are armed. Now they are oversee really the university and the academy, but at the academy we do have dedicated SROs. One of the things that came after the Covenant incident was to, instead of having one at each location, we have two at each location, 2 SROs. We have all the other things of we have the check-in, we have the, key access, all of that. We had that in place already. I think the gap that we maybe found was that one person was not enough. These are large buildings that we have, like our 2 schools in, and probably you need more than one. If that's possible. If there's, sometimes it's a funding issue. Obviously, we have to be real with that. But we've just found that was a really big gap, something that we really needed to work on, and found the funding to really make that happen. We did go ahead, the film that we talked about, that was the breach at Covenant. We had that put in, not on every window. I mean, we have multiple stories, so you had to think about that and where that was appropriate. And we also increased our cameras, much like Mark talked about. So those are some of the kind of, I would say, big things that we put in, probably since then. Some of that we had already, but definitely enhanced things this year.
Mark.
Kathy just reminded me of something about having somebody come in, like a third party come in. One of the things that we did when I first got here was to ask the Pennsylvania State Police to come out and do a risk and vulnerability assessment. It took a little bit, but it was free. But they came out and they spent several days here, did a phenomenal report, looking at all the different factors as far as securing such a large campus. We also hired outside consultants, two outside consultants, to come in and do a similar review of the safety and the security of the campus. And based upon those 3 reports, it provided me a lot of insight. And our department comes under the physical plant department. And so I work hand in hand. My immediate boss is the director of physical plant. So some of the recommendations were, had to do with grounds, like cutting down trees, for buildings, and cutting back on some of the foliage, ingress, egress, signage, we increased the signs, lighting, there are some lighting issues. And so there is a plethora of different things that we were able to glean from, especially from the state police report that we implemented, that, again, since it's an open campus, we don't want it to be shut down and fences all around it. So a lot of the things that we implement are behind the scenes things that you really don't see, but they're security things that are in place that, again, we got from bringing in someone else to look at our situation.
Going back to the security cameras and AI, like Greg mentioned earlier, I mean, the idea is to create an invisible fortress, right? Rather than building tall walls around the entire campus community, you can have, having folks watch. Someone asked about grants and funding. And one thing with religious schools specifically as nonprofits, there's the nonprofit security grant program. So Mark or Kathy, have either of you applied for grants, security grants from the federal government?
We did not with the federal, but we did with the state, Pennsylvania. We applied through the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. It's called PCCD. We applied for a grant last year or the year before, and we got a substantial amount of money that helped to purchase new cameras and the wiring and all that, and card access. And so we just applied for another one. Hopefully we'll find out January or February if we're going to get something. So they're out there. I know there's federal grants and there's state grants, so they're out there. So especially religious and private schools, they're out there, and they really can help you with your campus security.
We also, Mark, applied for this year. There was some funding. It was through the state level, though, as you said, not the federal. And we have not heard yet, but very optimistic from what we've been told by the intel there that we will get something. So we'll just have to see how much that is exactly. But there may be some kind of misconception. I think a lot of your private and maybe religious schools feel like they can't apply for things. I would like to encourage everybody on this call that it is a lot of work, let's be real, to apply for these grants. Hopefully you have someone at your school that can help you a bit with that, because it can be a very daunting task if you're going about it solo. But I would encourage people to try, state your case, your needs. I think that's a really important message for this group to have the audience to be able to do that. That would be my recommendation, at least.
And Kathy, I actually experienced here locally. I know Greg mentioned the Active Shooter Prevention Project. Some of the folks help with St. James has a school. It's a church and a school on a campus, and applied for the nonprofit security grant program and received funding this year for that to augment security infrastructure. But like most organizations, they were just not aware that this existed. And one of the core things, and you both mentioned it, and Greg also mentioned it, is starting with an assessment. Understanding where the vulnerabilities are, because in order to receive funding, you have to demonstrate, hey, here are the gaps that we have with our security infrastructure, training, protocols, and we need this funding to fill those gaps. What are your thoughts on that, Greg?
Well, grants, as both Kathy and Mark pointed out, they're very time consuming and difficult to write. They take a long time to get the money. Definitely put in for it. Absolutely. Don't let that stop you from putting in for free money. But what we have done here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for private and Christian schools is, there are a lot of high net worth individuals that send their kids to these schools. Utilize their funds, get the person who owns the 3 car dealerships and the 15 McDonald's, or the CEO of a Fortune 50 company, and have them put their money where their mouth is. Get them to donate, several thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on what their worth is, to help increase the security for their school. Because it only benefits them. It's usually tax deductible for them, and it makes a great marketing tool for them as well. So don't be afraid, all you security directors in private Christian schools, is to reach out to those high net worth individuals that send their kids to your school and ask them for money directly.
I want to say an amen to what Greg said, because that's very, very true. And when it comes to, I have found there's things people are very passionate about giving money for. The safety of the school is definitely one of them. So don't be shy about asking for sure for that.
No, absolutely, and that is that is absolutely critical. And like I said, we saw firsthand. One of the things that also want to remind folks with the ZeroNow community, there are folks within the community that can assist with grants from assessments to to helping with grant management and all that. So you could post right in the ZeroNow community. We'll post some links in there as well. Greg, I just want to go back to you again. So why don't you talk a little bit about the whole vulnerability assessment process? So I know Mark mentioned having like a local police department do it like a SEPTED type thing, looking at the environmental design, trimming back some bushes. I mean, are there different levels of assessment? Because I know that there are some free resources out there. There are paid assessments. What is your take on that?
Assessments are probably the hardest part of the job. Is trying to identify what the risks are and then developing things to mitigate those risks. Find out what the threats are. Kathy alluded to it as well. They're difficult to do and they're very time consuming. The good assessments want to take a couple, if not several days, depending on the size of the venue you're looking at. And then not only do you identify the threats and the risks, but you have to provide solutions to those threats and risks. And that's where Active Shooter Prevention Project, that's where we come into play. We come in and do the assessment, then we provide solutions. We have partnered with 18, 19, maybe even 20 by now, different companies that specialize in the cameras, the AI, the shot detection, the weapon detection, the film on the windows, training, tabletop exercise experts, stuff like that. So the assessment is just the first step. Once you identify what needs, what the threats and risks are, then you need to do things, take actions to mitigate those.
Absolutely. We spent a lot of time, obviously discussing, physical security and a lot of these aspects of Mark, now's the time, kind of want to really shift gears a little bit, focusing on culture, because we talked about, like Greg mentioned before, about prevention, and prevention is a community effort. It's not just one person or one part of the organization. It is a community effort, and fostering a culture of safety and being it's safe for students to talk to somebody about a potential situation, having a mechanism to report potential threats, either self-harm or harm of others. So how do you recommend private schools can foster a culture of safety and openness?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one thing that I've learned since I've been here, I learned a lot. The religious / private schools are a little bit different, probably a lot different than regular public schools. And so speaking with my peers in this whole area, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, we kind of all in the same bucket. And so one of the things, if you are a director of a private or religious or both boarding / day school, you understand that it takes incremental steps in order to get something done in this environment. You have to understand the culture. You have to understand the history, the traditions. When you're dealing with a public school system, you can come down and you say, this is how it's going to be done, period. But when you're at one of these institutions that goes back 100+ years, there's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of legacies. We have people here whose great grandparents went here, and their grandparents went here, and their parents went here, and they were born here. So you have a lot of ownership when it comes to making changes in this type of environment. And this is a Quaker institution, and you have to understand the Quaker values. And so when you make any significant changes when it comes to safety or security, it has to go through all these different buckets, these different committees and get buy-ins. So I encourage, if you're just starting or you've been there, to definitely understand the culture, the tradition, the values. Personal relationships go a long way when it comes to the head of schools, when it comes to the board of trustees. You got to get your face in front of them, so they have some kind of um, confidence in what you're doing. Also, the parents, and like you were talking about the community, the parent and guardian association, if you do have one, try to get your face in front of them, because they too, like Greg said, some of them, have vested a lot of money into their kids' education. And so it's different, again, than the public school system, where you have a school board, you have a superintendent, and, just get things done. In this type of environment, things get done kind of slower, incrementally, and you need a lot more buy-in for all the different stakeholders. But one thing, for us, we are concerned here, and a lot of schools that have residents that live on campus. I know a couple of my peer schools, their faculty are mandated to live on campus or whatever. One of the things that does is a force multiplier, because most schools, at the end of the day, everybody leaves, whether it's all the students, all the faculty, everybody leaves, boom, they're gone. And so, your school is vacated for 16 hours, whatever. Here, and as most private and religious schools, staff, they have boarders, so therefore they have house parents or dorm parents or whatever. So people live here. And so, again, I encourage them to be a force multiplier. Instead of having, my 28 eyeballs, now I have 283 eyeballs, And so see something, say something, when they're walking their dogs, when they're going out on the balcony and sweeping leaves or whatever. So I'm fortunate in that regard that we have people that live here, and it's a community. And so they definitely will let us know if it's a stranger or things are not, or, strange. So again, when I'm looking at the culture of religious / private schools, it's a little bit different, and things had to be done incrementally. But again, you have a lot of buy-in, feedback, and community support when it comes to campus safety issues.
Speaking of all the eyes, we're start taking some questions from participants and some submitted questions. Elias asks, when doing an assessment of schools, so most of the schools approve AI gun detection for the parking lot or the perimeter of the school, but not for inside the school. Greg, do you have any insights on the location of cameras running AI gun detection, or is that something that is the perimeter enough, or do you need to arm all the camera or equip all the cameras with artificial intelligence? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I would highly recommend having cameras on the inside as well. Should a handgun be brought in a backpack and now it's in a locker, as soon as that individual pulls that handgun out of the locker, you need the AI to identify that and get the notifications out to the police and to the teachers and to everybody else right away. So yes, that AI needs to be in both in the perimeter cameras and in the interior, as well as shot detection systems. Those first responders, when those police arrive, if they know the location of where that shot occurred, it'll really increase their response time. You look at Mark's campus or even Kathy's campus, multiple buildings, several hundred acres. Saying an active shooter on campus, the police officer has no idea where to begin his search for the shooter. So having those shot detection systems where they know exactly where that last shot occurred can really increase the response time. And there are statistics out there that show, without a doubt, that the quicker they get there, the less steps there are. So increasing that response time or minimizing that response time is a factor you need to consider.
Again, it's part of a multi-layered approach, right? It's
exactly.
Layers, detect a threat outside the building if possible. If not, it's about minimizing the response time to prevent harm at the end of the day. No, that's great. Question from John Foster from Trinity School of Durham and Chapel Hill. This kind of goes to what you were talking about, Mark, about engaging stakeholders. And you mentioned, before I get to jump into the question, one of the things you mentioned about see something, say something, and one of our ZeroNow advisors, Dr. Scott Geller from, I love sharing this, from Virginia Tech. he believes in see something, say something all the time, not only for negative things or potential threats, but also positive things, positive reinforcement. If somebody does something, like say something, recognize it, talk about culture, like, trying to, build an empathetic culture. But when it comes to, building the stakeholders, so going back to John's question, how do you engage stakeholders, especially with a religious school? You've got vestries, you have the religious part of it, you've got the educational part. Who should be at the table, and how do you engage all those stakeholders?
Everyone. So yeah, it's very daunting, but you have to have a physical presence, and you have to really sit down, knowing who the leaders, and most of these institutions, they are unofficial leaders. You have head of school, people with titles, but then you have individuals within the school that people know, they have a lot of juice, and so, first thing to do is trying to get an audience with those individuals. I know when I first got here, there were a couple of individuals that didn't have a official leadership title, but they were leaders in the community. And so to get, face time with them carried over a lot. So again, you need to identify all the different official entities within your institution, and then find out who are the real movers and shakers of those different buckets. And again, it's an incremental process. And like what Greg was saying about the AI and the cameras and stuff, when you have an institution like this, you have to go through a lot in order to add a camera, or you can't really bring them inside buildings because that's just not where they are right now. Some buildings do. But again, your institution, your culture, the traditions. So the best thing to do, like I said, is get with those stakeholders, those ones that are not the official ones, but they have a lot of juice. And so that's my recommendation.
I follow up on that, Mark. If you have a development officer at your school, which at private schools, somebody's doing that. That might not be their official title. I don't know, but I can guarantee you, your finance person or whoever your business officer is, they will have a list. They're going to have a list of the people who are the influencers, and I would definitely encourage you to kind of get with them and to try to make some of that happen. Because they're definitely out there. We have like I guess a grandparents' day. So, what better way to get funding than from the grandparents, because all that wealth has kind of moved on to them usually. So I would say, cast your net broad. Definitely look at those grandparent lists, because I found those to be the ones that probably are the most likely to want to write a big check or help out with some kind of need that you have. And they're honored really to do that. I mean, it makes them feel really good. Everybody kind of comes away a winner, I think, in those situations.
I agree with Kathy. And one great day of the year, it was 2 great days of the year, Alumni Day and Homecoming. So those 2, you got to get out there. You only get two bites of the apple. So those are 2 great days to get to know people.
Yeah, no doubt. And Chief Dussault, hey, Dan commented. Dan is a regular panelist here as well. He agrees with the panel. Become close with facilities, HR, and finance if you want to move the safety security needle forward. Absolutely great insights, Dan. So, Greg, Aaron Weaver asked, and this is right up your alley. So, how do you deal with the never here? It'll never happen here. And we always talk with ZeroNow about the disconnect, because the adults, if you will, the administrators think it's never going to happen here, but the students, on the other hand, it's a matter of when is it going to happen? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So how do you address that with administration?
I mean, you're always fighting administration. We've always done it that way. So Mark and Kathy, they have a tough job, and all you directors out there, security, I get that you have a tough job, because you got to convince those administrators, that one, they think it'll never happen here. We've never had violence on campus. Why should we have violence now? Okay, so that's a huge hurdle and a huge paradigm shift. Mark's a perfect example. He's got an open campus, living people and no armed response. And I'm sorry, but I would have a hard time not getting really adamant with that administrator and say, you need an armed response here. If anywhere, here, without a fence and everything else, open campus. But that's Mark's battle to fight. But I think both Mark and Kathy can probably address that question better than I can. But I just know, again, we've always done it this way, and we've never been a victim of violence. Those are two hurdles that you have to get across to get them to understand. The subtitle of my book, Today's More Dangerous World. We are living in a more dangerous world. Things have changed. Schools today are not the schools that the administrators attended when they were a kid. It's completely different. Take, for example, school fires. Back in the 1930s, we had children dying every year from school fires. Well, we haven't had a child in America die in a school fire in 65 years, but we still mandate fire drills in every school in America every month. What is a greater threat in today's school? Somebody dying from violence or somebody dying in a school fire? Well, the answer is simple. We all know somebody dying from violence. So, and another stat out there too, that doesn't relate directly to schools, but the most common cause of death for a female in the workplace, not heart attack, not stroke, it's violence. And you can Google that. The most common cause of death for a woman in the workplace is violence. We are living in a more dangerous world. Don't sit back in your laurels and think it will never happen to you.
Kathy, I mean, how do you fight that battle, the never hear mentality at your school?
Unfortunately, I have, as I said, I'm going on my 19th year here. So, if I had money for every time I heard that over the years, I'd probably be living with you, Greg, down in somewhere in your wonderful Mexico place. But anyway, unfortunately, I don't hear that as much after what happened in March, and that's a really sad statement. I think, when something happens to that magnitude that's less than a mile from your school, you don't get many people who will say that anymore. And I say that with a little bit of emotion in my heart there. People don't say that because they know, if it happened there, it could happen anywhere. And so I don't wish that on all of the people in the attending this webinar that happens. But I do think that, you do have to kind of use those opportunities, being in this kind of line of work for a while, things that have happened. I think it is upon us to kind of tell administration, hey, here's some of the facts that were at this particular, incident, wherever that is. And there's way too many of them that happen. Here's some of our vulnerabilities. We need to think about that. And hopefully, hopefully people are not saying that anymore as much as they did. To Greg's point, I think things have changed. It is a different kind of world. But yes, unfortunately, we do hear that more than I would like.
And Greg's book, we'll have a link available for that in the community after this. Makes a great holiday gift. So we'll take one last question. So Dan Dussault asked a question. This, I think, is very relevant. So this is for Mark and Kathy. So do either of your schools use volunteers, like parents or grandparents, to provide security? And if so, what kind of training do you provide? Mark, we'll start with you.
That's quick. No.
Okay. Good answer. Kathy.
It would be a no.
Okay. That's good. Well, it's interesting. Like I said, being part of the process at my local religious school, if you will, it's one of the biggest challenges is because there is no security director. There's the whole adage that you don't know what you don't know. And making sure that you're aware of what's involved with a holistic approach to safety at a private school, looking at the environment specifically is such an important factor. And I know, often you have, and in our case there were volunteers because we didn't have the staff. But that's one of the key things. I mean, looking forward is having folks like Kathy and Mark, as a very specific role, who understands the big picture and can bring that to the school to lead. And we always say safety is a journey, right? You don't get to safe school. It's a process, it's a journey to get there, and you need someone to lead that effort. And with that, we're going to ask for final thoughts and words of wisdom from our guests today. And we're going to bring it in at that point. Kathy, would you mind sharing your final thoughts with our participants?
Sure. I think in listening to all this, I think sometimes it can be a very tough and lonely job. It's kind of a heavy, there's, a lot that goes with this. I want to encourage everybody that I have found this during my time working in education. You're not alone. There are other people, if they may be going through something that you're going through, or they're thinking about it. I would, encourage people to have their networks like ZeroNow, have that as a way to connect with people. Don't be embarrassed to ask some questions. There's people out there that will help you. That's my biggest takeaway, I think, is just, have a network, people that you can reach out to, that you trust, and keep that going.
Kathy, agree 100%. That's why the mantra here at ZeroNow is together we'll make school safer for good. Together. It's not just this journey. If you go at it by yourself, good luck to you. But there are people that care that are also on that journey that can help along the way and share your experiences. Like I've learned a ton already today. So this is great.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kathy. Greg, final thoughts, words of wisdom.
First, I tip my hat to Kathy and Mark. I mean, they are fighting an uphill battle every day. They are scratching and clawing their way to making their schools safer, and it's an uphill battle. And Kathy, your response to what happened, very nearby to your school, and the increase in security for 2 SROs, again, fantastic. That just warms my heart to hear that people are taking this serious and are increasing safety and security. And Mark, same thing with your campus there. But I guess my final thought is don't ever think it can't happen to you. And to, like you said, reach out. There are a host of organizations and experts and communities. We can fix this. We can stop active shooters. It's a multifaceted problem with a multifaceted approach, but the answers are there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Reach out to me anytime. And I got a community of experts that will get you the answers that you need.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Mark, please share your wisdom with us, sir.
Thank you for providing this forum for us and for the participants and the people on here. I was going to chime just on what Kathy said, that ZeroNow is a great forum. I've been to a couple of these things and learned a lot. I remember one was the politics of fire alarms or whatever, and I was like, yeah, I was having problems with that. So I agree with Greg and Kathy. Reach out. One of the things for me, I was new. So there are very light types of campuses around me. They're religious or private religious schools and boarding schools. And we formed an informal group, and we visited each other's campuses and got free lunches, which is always a positive. But again, when you're in this bucket, you think you're by yourself. Well, everybody else is going through the same thing, whether they're dealing with their, higher ups, or they're dealing with the parents, or dealing with the students, or they're dealing with technology. And again, if you network and you find you can really learn a lot to help you and help each other. But again, it's been a pleasure being part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Kathy and Greg. And just want to remind our participants, immediately after this program, you could jump right to the ZeroNow community and continue this conversation. We have a lot of questions that we did not have a chance to get to. So those questions will be posted in the community. You could ask additional questions of Greg, Mark, and Kathy. So this was our last program of the year. Next year we're kicking things off on January 16th. We're talking about the future of school safety technology. Focusing on technology, but from that, we're doing a launch of the Path to Zero, and so we're going to be discussing different aspects. We talked about how safety is a journey, and so the ZeroNow community has distilled all the major concepts of school safety into a very, really clear, concise visual of what school safety looks like and how to get there. So we're going to be discussing that a lot in 2024. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you all in the community afterwards. Stay safe. Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Mark and Kathy. We'll talk to you guys soon. Stay safe.